like to call to order this January 27th, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting to order. Mr. Anagnastu, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Kilbane?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here.
Ms. Stochek?
Here.
And Mrs. Hausum?
Here.
We are all present. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is our district goals. Our district goals remain academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And we judge all of our decisions and all of our discussion by those three goals. We're going to go a little bit out of order because we're excited about our recognition. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ryba.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. On behalf of all of our administrators and staff in the school district, January is Board Recognition, Board Appreciation Month. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for the work that you do. Sharon and Haley, welcome aboard. You know, it is a job that I don't think everybody knows how much time and dedication and energy it takes to be an effective board member, and three of you have exhibited that over your terms, and I know Sharon and Haley will. So on behalf of the district, thank you for your service to our school district, our kids, and our community. And as a token of our appreciation, we've given you a little personalized journal there, so you can write all your board notes and thoughts and ideas in there. And as I shared with Sharon, unfortunately, the mail did not cooperate. One package will be delivered tomorrow, so Sharon, you'll get yours here shortly. So once again, on behalf of everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, proud to bring Athletic Director from Strongsville High School, Denny Ziegler, up to the podium to share an athletic recognition for this evening. Denny?
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. At this time, I want to bring up Coley Sidlowski and Libby Machka. Right there's fine. Yeah, it's good. So, Libby and Coley were members of our 2021 women's soccer team. They were four-year starters for our team, and they had the opportunity to go in December down to Knoxville, Tennessee, and to participate in the Top Drawer Soccer All-American Game. For those of you that don't know, the Top Drawer Soccer is the elite status of high school soccer. If your team, if your program, if you are on the Top Drawer Soccer national list, that is the cream of the crop. So obviously Coley and Libby were two of those members. They played on the West team. They did lose, unfortunately, 5-0, but they had fun, and the experience that they had was unknown. They were only the 7th and 8th Strongsville High School girls to ever go to this All-American game. The third time that Strongsville has had two or more athletes go at the same time. Over the course of the years, these young ladies have been an instrumental part of not only our soccer program, but student council, athletic department, and in other sports as well. They are highly dedicated student athletes. They go above and beyond everything. They are exceptional leaders in our student council. They had a lot of adversity hit them this year, and their response was one that I've never seen. They never let that waver who they are as people, as a team, as a program, and even better, not only them, but their families have done a lot for the Strongsville community as well as the Strongsville soccer program. In their 4 years, they went to 2 Final Eights, a state final, they were a state champion, and they were a national champion, the first time ever in the history of Strongsville High School that we have a national champion. So Libby and Coley, congratulations, and thank you guys very much for your dedication to the Strongsville soccer program.
So on behalf of the board, I just want to congratulate both young ladies, their parents also. It is a team effort. I'm very fond of saying that we're proud of you, because I don't think oftentimes young people hear that enough. But we're proud of you for all your efforts. We're proud of you for all of your accomplishments. And we're proud of you because you're great examples for younger Mustangs that are growing up and can see what you do and now can set their minds to achieving great things also. So thank you again. Next is public comment. I have 3 slips. First is Hillary Yankello. If you can come to the podium.
This is my first time up here, so I have to say Hillary Yankello, 12468 Saddlebrook Lane, Strongsville. Am I good? Okay. No, I'm not giving my phone number. Kelly and I are here tonight on behalf of the Strongsville Council PTA. Every year, our 10 PTA units come together to honor individuals chosen by each unit for the Founders Day Award. These awards are given to individuals who have rendered outstanding service to children and youth in our district. The 10 recipients will be honored on the evening of Thursday, March 3rd. This year, the Council PTA is beyond thrilled to announce to you tonight that our 2022 recipient of this award goes to Mr. George Anagnostiu.
Thank you. I was kind of caught off guard. I'm honored.
I was going to say we were here to tell you that there was a mess up in your 5-year forecast, but we didn't want to have to call 911.
Seriously, I'm honored. Kind of surprised and caught off guard. So thank you. Thanks for thinking of me, and that's don't have the words right now. So.
When is the
Thank you.
when is Founders Day? March 3rd. Start writing your speech now.
Yeah. Thanks again, Hillary, Kelly. Thank you, and to the entire council PTA. Thank you.
Once again. Continuing, Beverly Masick.
Beverly Masick. I live in Ward 2, 17142 Rabbit Run Drive. I'm here today as a resident of Strongsville to thank Dr. Ryba for the insightful article that was in the December issue of the Strongsville Post. I not only want to thank him, but I also want to thank the school board and the entire school system for the unique ways that they educate the whole child. It is holistic teaching, in my opinion. And from the article I learned it happens at every age level and in a variety of methods. Dr. Ryba said in the article that it is a different world today, and I agree with that. The day of a one-room schoolhouse where reading, writing, and arithmetic were taught is gone. Our students now need to be prepared for the world when they graduate, whether it's getting a job, going to vocational school, or to college. The skills needed are much different than before. The world is larger, it's closer, and it's more diverse. And most importantly, the workplace is different today. Graduates need to be able to communicate effectively, manage work relationships with conflict and collaboration. I want to mention just a tiny bit of my professional background because it backs up what I'm saying. I have a master's degree in education, but it's in adult education. What does having a degree in adult education mean? Well, in my case, I was the person who worked with employees after they graduated in the workplace. I was the person who helped employers to develop their employees so that they could fit into today's work environment. I worked in organizational training and development, and I consulted in organizational training and development, and I did it for years. Let me give you one small example of what I did to help support the idea of educating the whole child. I consulted for over 2 years with an engineering company in Elyria. They wanted all of their employees who worked the machines and in the offices and the engineers to have training in terms of teams, working on teams and problem solving. What did that entail? Well, the employee had to be able to know how to work on a team. They had to know how to problem solve. How do you speak to other employees whose opinions are different than yours? How do you instill creativity? How do you present your results in terms of to the executives? For over 25 years, I consulted with employees on the changing work environment and what they needed their employees to do. What do you want of your employees, I would ask. Repeatedly, they said, I can train an employee on a machine and with a computer, but I can't teach them how to communicate and get along with other employees. I need employees who think, communicate, interact well with customers and other employees. They may be excellent on the computer, but I need them to be able to express themselves and get along with a variety of colleagues. You've heard it say it takes a village to raise a child, and I do believe that, because there's many situations that have teaching moments. Dr. Ribe said in his article, we are driven to ensure our students have the foundational skills academically, as well as the skills to effectively communicate, collaborate, and to work with others, so they're well prepared for the workplace, and that I can say is true. What better place to foster those skills but in an environment that has a variety of people with different points of view, guided by excellent teachers and counselors, than in our city public schools. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you. It's always nice to hear a thank you. Next is Sandy Trudler.
Hello, everyone. I do a little show and tell. You're never too old, right? So, all right, let's turn around this way. Okay. In front of the board members, you have a packet from me, which has a picture in it.
Sandy, I don't
I'm
mean
sorry.
to interrupt.
Yes.
Name and address.
Sandy Troidler, 20121 Bradgate Lane in Strongsville.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time and attention to a very serious matter in our music education department. In front of you is that picture, as well as a half sheet of paper that I'll be referring to a little bit later on. I loved being the marching band uniform head chairperson for 9 years at the high school under both Mr. Harbart and Mr. King. All three of my children participated in the band program throughout high school. In front of you is a sousaphone case, a marching tuba. The brass instrument within and its case can weigh as much as 55 pounds. A fiberglass tuba is a lot lighter at about 35 pounds total. In Mr. King's second year as head director, a small, shy 100-pound 10th grader who already participated as a freshman in band repeatedly requested an extra tuba to have at home so she could practice. I happen to know that at that time we were storing at least 4 to 5 tubas in the auditorium, and I placed them there. Mr. King's response to this young lady was, "No, you'll have to transport your instrument home daily for practice." Now, I'm not quite sure she took the bus, but she wasn't yet driving, and I really doubt such a large instrument would actually be allowed onto a bus. What do you think? Sadly, that young lady quit band at the end of that year. A few months later, her mother sent me this statement. "I wish my child would have stayed with band. She loved the marching band part of it, and she was to the point that going to band class was giving her a stomach ache. She had a panic attack one day at school, so she came home instead of going to practice. I emailed Mr. King, and his response was, 'It is unexcused.' Honestly, Band just wasn't worth it. Here are some other quotes from students who had Mr. King in band classes or eventually quit altogether. Mr. King told me that I was poison to the band and not good enough. Mr. King took my enjoyment of playing music and twisted it into the reason I now have panic attacks if I go near the high school for any reason. Band used to be the highlight of my day. Now with Mr. King, I only look forward to leaving band class. Another student said, in 16 years of my education, I have never had a teacher or professor treat students in the degrading, aggressive, and toxic manner the way Mr. King has. Parents have also shared some concerns. Band provided some of the fondest memories for me and my children, but that changed once Mr. King became the band director. My oldest quit after just 2 rehearsals with him, and his obsessive repetition of measures, militaristic attitude at band camp, and teacher favoritism. My children were terrified to let Mr. King know they couldn't make one of these weekend band activities that were scheduled. Another parent said, I picked up my child from summer band camp looking tired and dehydrated and was told he will not let them take enough water breaks. And an influential parent to me said, this is the first time that I have encountered a teacher who is not willing to work with their students, especially when the student goes to them for help and assistance. The picture in front of you has an arrow on it. It is of the young lady I was talking about with the sousaphone case. She actually is quite a bit smaller than her instrument. Also, further documentation regarding the data that is in your packet there will be emailed to you tomorrow. It is quite large, and I hope it will go through. But the sheet, this half sheet of paper, is listing the band participation rates of high schools around our area. And as you see, Solon and their new director in recent years are at the top with 20% of their total high school enrollment participating in marching band. North Rollton and their new director as well are at 17%. Berea and Mid-Park is at 16%, and you'll find Strongsville at the rock bottom with 7% of their total high school enrollment in marching band. Even Ohio got a new marching band director. Do you think people would tolerate drastic changes to their strong traditional program? What would happen if they got rid of Script Ohio or changed the cadence to Hang On Sloopy? From 2015 to 2019, under Mr. King's directorship, the high school's total enrollment dropped 8.6%. But the band enrollment under him had dropped an astounding 44%. We've gone from 214 students down to 120 in band, and that's the lowest number in over 50 years. Do you realize that only 16 of the almost 80 8th graders in 2018 are now 11th graders in band this year? That is less than a 20% participation rate. These students commit to more than 50 extracurricular events and practices and about 215 hours in the 3 months of the marching band season each year for up to 4 years. Yeah, it's an elective. This class should be fun, where one should feel good coming in and going out, and they need to practice and repeat measures, but not obsessively. Don't belittle them and tell them they're not good enough for you. They are not perfect students. This class has become so academic it has increased stress and anxiety to the point of physical illness. It is also a known fact that Mr. King, unfortunately, does not collaborate well with any of his district colleagues. Some music teachers have even outrightly refused to work with him. When talking about Mr. King, most people just roll their eyes. So what are the issues again? Band is no longer fun. Dances, chants, and parade motions have all been removed. Lack of child safety, which is detailed in your packet. Obsessive repetition over and over and over again. He's not fair. He tells us we're not good enough. It's really hard to have a part-time job because camp hours have more than doubled and regular practices were increased. King just won't compromise. Mr. King disrespects us as parents with his unending changes to original dates and times. And Dr. Ryba, please correct me if I'm wrong, I have recently seen your initiative to create a committee to increase diversity. Do you think phasing out special needs students from the band is a good idea? It was Teresa Buzelli, a Down syndrome band student and banner carrier for years, who was elected by her senior class to be prom queen in 2014. It was Nicholas Farron, cymbalist, who quit after the 2016 band season to become the beloved water boy for the varsity team and was also awarded a city award. And it was the skilled quad drumsticks of Devin Rose, who King prohibits from being around band students and the school in general. Inclusion of these students into a larger group of others is what it takes to teach diversity acceptance. In closing, I realize that Mr. King's career is at stake here. I have not taken this matter lightly, but I feel the position of someone who in just 5 years has clearly decimated this program, as reflected by its participation numbers, should be reevaluated for future placement. I leave you with one final statement, which I can't believe I'll be saying this, and I don't believe you'll believe me when I say it. But King was overheard saying to another music director after a concert, "That was the worst concert I have ever heard." Thank you.
So normally, well, not normally, we usually try to do more listening than speaking during public comment, and we will continue to do that. We've listened, we've heard. We've listened and we've heard what was said, but we will respond. The subject matter is serious. We need to assure our parents that we have heard them, and nobody isn't accountable. So we will respond, and we're going to take the time to formulate that response. Thank you. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. We do have a correction on the agenda. The corrected dates are November 4th and November 18th, regular Board of Education meetings, along with the December 9th and January 6th Board of Education meetings. All district video and audio recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes and available on our website. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Stovcek. Any discussion? George, please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is our treasurer's report. Mr. Anagnostou.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I have several items for your consideration tonight. The first is the financial report for the month ending November 30th, 2021, which can be found in Exhibit A. We didn't have we had an early December meeting and not a second one due to the holidays, so the November report gets pushed to January. And then following that, I do have the financial report for the month ending December 31st, 2021, which can be found in Exhibit B. And I also have the monthly supplemental report that I'll go over, which compares the month-end data, the December month-end data in comparison to last year, and then also to the 5-year forecast. So how we're trending through December 31st in comparison to the November 5-year forecast. Our current year-to-date revenue collections are favorable by close to $500,000, $488,133. That is, I'll touch on it in another slide, but that is mainly due to the state foundation. As we talked about in the fall, the state switched they implemented a new funding formula through the legislation called the Fair Funding Formula, and it was finally enacted with the first payment in January. And when we did the forecast, it was based on assumptions on how the forecast would play out. Now that we actually received the data for the forecast for the foundation formula, our annual funding for this year is about $400,000 more than what was forecasted. So that's a few extra dollars on our end. And then how the expenditures are tracking compared to the forecast, they're about right now 53,000 under the forecast. So in total, the net impact to the 5-year forecast is a positive $541,000. And what that means, our June 30th, 2022 cash balance at the end of the fiscal year will result in about $59.7 million. Revenues in comparison to December revenues in comparison to December revenues of last year. Last year's December revenues totaled for the month totaled 1.7 million, and they're down about $1 million for this past December, which we received about 733,000. And the main difference is twofold. One, the biggest decrease is for last year we received one-time funds for Bureau of Workers' Compensation, refunds and premium rebates that exceeded $1 million. Those were one-time payments, and they were received in November and December. And then the other decrease is the fair funding formula that was implemented. We had dollars that flowed through our district in the previous foundation funding that were for community schools and scholarships for private schools. Those dollars are taken out of our formula, and they're no longer passed through the district. They're sent to directly by the state to those other entities. So with that, it decreased our revenues, and it also decreased our expenditures as those dollars are no longer passed through. And how that compares to fiscal year to date from July through December. In total, revenues are down 600,000. Tax collections are up by 600,000. State revenues are down by 833, and again, that's due to the pass-through dollars for those other entities. And then other revenue is down by 362,000, and that's primarily due to the Bureau of Workers' Comp and premium rebates and refunds. And how that's trending to the forecast, as mentioned earlier, we're trending about $488,000 favorable to the forecast, where majority of it is in state revenues. And then with 6 months left in the fiscal year, we'll continue to monitor the trends for revenues. January, February, and March, we'll receive the remaining property tax collections for the fiscal year, which is our largest revenue source. So once we receive that total, we can kind of get a good grasp on where our revenues are going to be for the year. So continue to monitor, update as revenues come in with each month-end report. So before I move on to expenditures, any questions on revenues? So expenditures, in total for the month of December, last December, our expenditures were $6.2 million in the general fund. And for this December, there's $6.2 million as well, but they're up by $48,000. It's a net. Salary and benefits are up by $200,000, and purchase services are down by $138,000. And again, the reason why purchase services are down is because of the pass-through dollars. That's where the expenses were booked for those tuition payments. And we see the similar trend for a year-to-date through December. Salary and benefits, those expenses are up by $1.6 million. Purchase services are down by $500,000, and all other expenses are up by $340,000. If we take out the tuition payments for purchase services and material supply, those expenses vary from month to month as the invoices are paid as the services or materials are needed, bought, and incurred. So overall, compared to last year, expenditures are up by $1.4 million. How it's trending against the forecast, it's trending favorably. It's $53,000 under so far against a $75.6 million forecast. Salary and benefits are about $171,000 less or more, or trending under, and purchase services and material supplies are trending about $110,000 more. And again, we'll continue to watch the forecast with 6 months left into the year. And as expenditures are are incurred, paid, and we'll continue to update the trends in the report and report out on a monthly basis. So any questions on expenditures or the report in general? No? Oh, thank you. So moving on, item C, approval of new funds, which can be found in Exhibit C. We do have several new funds for this meeting. It's kind of unusual to have so many at this time of year, but we were awarded several new federal funds. That I'll just go through the list briefly. So we received a food service. It's called PEBT Administrative Grant. That needs to be accounted for separate in the food service fund under a different cost center. We received about $3,000, and it's to administer the summer feeding that took place over the summer. So the federal government pushed some dollars through the schools to reimburse them for some of their costs. And the dollars were received. They had a three-tier chart based on your size, school district, where you fit into one of those. So we needed to create a new fund for that. Also through the ESSER program, we received homeless funds and about $11,000 for ARP homeless. We submitted budget those. Right now, we don't have any need for any students for those, but are available if a need becomes available, and they're handled through our Student Services Department. We also received ARP IDEA B funds, which is additional funds that we received from ESSER, which follow the same rules under IDEA B, and also the same funding source, but for IDEA B preschool as well. And the last one, we received about $30,000 for Title I for the high school. Usually our Title I dollars are for elementary schools. There was a new grant called Expanding Opportunities for Each Child, which is under Title I to be used for secondary students at the high school. And those dollars will be used for additional AP materials and curriculum items, and then also career pathway materials as well. And then the next item, any questions on new funds before I move on to the next item? Item D, grant approval. We received from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, a middle school step outside grant for $500. And what this is made up of, one of our wellness teachers at the middle school, Jeff Martinelli, about 5 years ago applied for a bigger grant to have archery as part of the physical education program, where we were able to buy the bows, the arrows, and the targets. Every year, he now applies for a $500 grant to kind of update the arrows and any supplies for that, so to continue his program. And then the last item I have is the permanent appropriation measure, which can be found in Exhibit D with the explanations of the changes. So
Any other questions for George? I think it'd be timely to take the opportunity before this meeting. We had our post-audit. The state of Ohio, the auditor, Keith Faber, audits all the school districts, all the government entities in Ohio, and we're one of those, and we received the results. I wanted to compliment the entire board. Not every board can say that they go to these audits. Sometimes they feel boring, but they're important, and I mentioned that to the two auditors, Evan and Don, that the work they do is important to assure ourselves and the public that we're good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar. And I'm proud of the fact, and wanted to compliment George and his team, that we had an unmodified audit, not for the first time, not for the second time, for the upteenth time. And it continues to be unmodified. It continues to have no other findings or no other management notes. It's an A+. It comes off as unmodified, and you're scratching your head, is that good or bad? It is extremely good, and it is an A+. And so I wanted to compliment not just George, but his entire team, and that's Nick Mancini, Dawn Evangelista, Ruth Ann Franzak, Joan Kohut, Judy Jerkago, and Mickey Konachinsky. The hard one is the one that you get right. And in addition to just George's team, we need to compliment everyone, because the Georgia's team can't record things correctly and timely if everybody isn't working as a team and providing that information. But congratulations, George. We're proud of the distinction again.
Thank you. It's, as Richard, you touch, it's a complete district effort. Everyone has to be working together collaboratively, and also following the procedures that we have in place in order to continue to have the successful audits that we're having. And then, as mentioned to you and at the post audit, the second meeting in February, someone from the auditor's office will be here to present to the board the Auditor's Award for Distinction, which is the third year in a row that the district received this award.
And
So,
it's just coincidence that PTA and State Auditor Faber recognize the contributions you make to the district.
thank
So,
you. And
thank
to
you.
that, I want to thank Hillary and Kelly again and the council PTA. I was caught a little off guard earlier, so I had a little time to collect my thoughts. Again, it's an honor to be considered for the recognition alone, especially to receive it, but thank you. And there's been the people that received it in the past to be named with them as well. So it's an honor. Thank you, and I appreciate it. That concludes my
Any other
report.
questions? Dr. Ryba, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. We've got a handful of items to discuss tonight. We're going to start with the school calendar. So as you remember, in December, we had a presentation from a committee. That committee is 3 members of our teaching staff, 3 members of our support staff, 3 administrators, and 3 parents. And they presented the calendar for the next two school years. We had a public hearing. We opened up and shared in my updates. If you have any feedback, please share that with us. There was some minimal feedback that was received. That's been updated to the board. You've seen that feedback. I also took that feedback and shared it back with the calendar committee to say, is there anything here in this feedback that you'd like to comment on that is cause for us to reconvene and meet? The board has seen that feedback as well, and the committee has decided not to meet because of the suggestions or the feedback shared. Those were things that were already considered and vetted and discussed by the committee. There wasn't new information that was brought up that hadn't already been discussed. So the Exhibit E, the calendars, there's no changes to what was shared with the community and parents, no changes to what was presented in December. I did want to highlight a few things just as feedback that we received. So one of the points of feedback is, why do we continue to start so early and end in May? You know, Ohio weather isn't the greatest in June anymore. Why don't we move it later? So this is something that this committee has talked about for multiple years. And there are 2 primary reasons. The first of all is educationally, there's state tests. Our kids in our grades 3 on up to high school take state tests. Those are primarily in April. And I love the tune, George. I know. That's not the background music I was thinking, but it works. Yeah, right. Someone must know you won an award. They're congratulating you. So, so going back, the reason we start earlier in August is because of state tests. We need to prepare our students and have the most instructional days possible so our students can be best prepared for those assessments, as well as the way they're formulated in terms of the curriculum. You have to teach predominantly all the curriculum in that course prior to the test so the kids are ready, which means afterwards, not that there's not stuff to do, but a lot of it has been covered already. So that's why we start early. The second reason we start early has to do with the high school and has to do with midterm exams. So probably about 6 years ago, we started to get a lot of parent complaints and concerns about, my child, my high school student, my middle school student that takes high school classes, they're taking their winter break studying because 3 or 4 days after winter break is over, they've got to come and take a midterm exam. So by starting a little bit earlier, we could put the exams before winter break so every student can truly have a winter break, not have to worry about studying or midterm exams and start in January with the second semester. So those are the 2 main reasons for why we start earlier in August versus late August after Labor Day, and why we end in May rather than the second week in June. The second thing was more of an internal piece of feedback, which was Per the teacher's contract, we need to have a professional development records day at the end of the first semester. As I just talked about, the end of the first semester is before winter break. There was some feedback that shared, hey, why don't we have that as the first day back for teachers? So the first day back from winter break would be a teacher professional development day. The second day back would be students. The committee vetted that again, and because of a variety of reasons, whether it be the way it impacts teachers and staff having to come back on a day that people should have off because it's close to New Year's Day, whether it be for the amount of time it leaves in that week, whether it makes a 2-day week or for students or for staff. And it wasn't, there was a handful of people, we're not ignoring the feedback, but there's, as we've all, if you've done calendars for a while, there's concerns on every side, right? You move that day, the idea of coming back and, you know, the people that have to plan professional development, that's a heavy lift for them as well after being off for a few weeks. The other, so you have why do we start and end at the times we do, a little bit of feedback on that internal kind of professional development day, and how that relates to winter break. And then the other big point of feedback was the asynchronous days. And I understand that parents are not thrilled with the asynchronous days, and it's another day where kids are at home. And it's not a day that they're just at home, but it's a day they're at home and there's some work to do as well. They are still in there for, and I wanted to give kind of the context for why we're having these asynchronous days, and why they're not just days off. So first of all, it starts with the why. The why for us is we need additional opportunities to provide professional development for our staff. Based on some of the feedback I've got, people feel that it's related to the pandemic. It's not related to the pandemic. We have a year-long professional development plan. Right now, we're working with our teachers on truly understanding their content standards, then taking those content standards and looking at how they can develop meaningful assessments that can give us great information on student learning. And then in February 14th, I think, or 18th, maybe February 18th, the next one, high school is going to do stuff on high-quality student data. Elementary school, and that's the middle school as well, elementary school is going to focus on how are we creating meaningful and using meaningful instructional strategies to benefit our students in our lessons based on this. So it becomes difficult when you have to do this and piecemeal it as a few teachers at a time, So we have a clear plan for these days, and we need them to continue to grow our staff. And I know it's a short-term inconvenience, but this short-term inconvenience provides for the 300-plus teachers we have and the 300-plus OPSI staff members that we provide professional development to, a long-term benefit in terms of developing capacity and growing our staff that's going to pay off for our students on all of the other days that they're in school. The other issue that we have is, let's say, for example, we wanted to do that professional development, and we said, we're okay, let's do the math department this day, and second grade this day, and fifth grade that next day. In today's time, we simply do not have the substitutes to do that. We are ranging anywhere between 70% to low 80% fill rate just for people that are out because of sick, leaves, whatever it may be. So we don't have the substitute staff right now to completely fill people that are just sick or on vacation or whatever it may be for our 260 staff on a daily basis. So, you know, that's a way that we can use this opportunity to provide that professional development, do it all together so everybody's hearing the same message at the same time, giving the ability for people to collaborate and plan and process, and not have to have a PD. We do have PDs still, but they're small groups, and a lot of times Jenny has to call them and say, I'm sorry you're not having PD today because we don't have enough subs, you've got to go back into the classroom. It just doesn't work out well. And then, you know, and the other part that I wanted to mention is we've heard the feedback, we've heard the frustrations. We have a parent committee that we've been working with over the past month. I have a superintendent advisory team with teachers asking their feedback so we can become more focused on what is the expectation for teachers on what assignments they should or should not be given on the asynchronous day. What's the expectation for students? So we can provide better clarity, and I think in February we'll be able to alleviate a lot of frustration. We'll see where we're at. One of the things that Mr. Micko, you said a couple years ago when we started talking about these asynchronous days is As a board, the board would prefer to have those planned out and in the calendar if we felt we needed them, rather than I came to you, the board, and said, hey, we would like these days mid-year. So the idea is, let's put them in the calendar, let's have them so people know. Right now, we have a plan for all of next year where we're going to need those days. But, you know, based on continued feedback, if we need to adjust those, if we need to look at the plan for how we're implementing, we can. And 23, 24 is a placeholder. We need to see at the end of next school year, do we have that same need? If we do, we'll utilize them. If not, I'll come to the board and say, hey, I think we can put those back to student days. The part that I failed to mention is, why do we just not have them as a student day off? The reason being, and today is a prime example, in preschool and half-day kindergarten, we do not have enough banked hours to meet the minimum school year requirements. And that means that students would have to do blizzard bags, or basically do more asynchronous work, if we took those days and moved them to asynchronous. Right now, we've had 2 calamity days. That's all that half-day kindergarten has in the bank, so they're out. If we have another calamity day, we're going to have asynchronous work for the kids to do to make up for that time. Preschool, they're allowed to do, preschool's out of time, but they're allowed to do some other parent engagement things that count. So we're out of time there. So that's why we just don't say, hey, it's a day off. Any further questions or clarifications that I can provide to the board?
I think we have a good plan, and I think it's important that we recognize there's room for improvement with asynchronous days, and we can do that. And then if a year from now we don't necessarily need them, having the students in person is ideal.
Yeah.
So we'll just continue to try to balance a bunch of things that don't want to be balanced. Any other questions or comments?
All right, moving on, I am actually going to switch the order. We're going to start with contact tracing and COVID protocols first, and then we'll go into the public hearing and the continuity of services plan. The reason I am changing the order is that the Ohio Department of Health came out with a change yesterday that said school districts no longer need to contact trace. And so let's talk about what that means for us and my proposed plan to implement the Ohio Department of Health guidance. And then that will drive our continuity plan, which basically says, how are we going to operate during this pandemic? It's a plan we have to create by the state of Ohio. So all board members, and George and Jenny, you have slides in front of you if you want to follow along. And we'll put the slides on the board. So before we get into the Ohio Department of Health rules, I thought I would give a little context. It's not just about the Ohio Department of Health changing a rule, but it's about, does it make sense for Strongsville City Schools, right? There's been guidelines that they've put out, I shouldn't say rules, they're guidance they put out, right? So they put out guidance before, and we've used our local data to decide how closely we align with that guidance, and so we're going to do the same things here. I just wanted everybody to be aware what contact tracing involves. It was the decision that it's the reason I had kids masked the 2 weeks after winter break was because of contact tracing. But just if you take a look at it, let a student, and I'll use the secondary, high school, middle school as an example. A student tests positive for COVID. Parent calls it in, says my child's test positive for COVID. Somebody in the administration has to go through every class period for that student to say, what are they in every class period, and who is around that person in all of those class periods? They've got to gather around for all that information. And once they look at all those kids, they've got to say, okay, what are the rules for direct contacts? Which kids around them in all 8 periods of their day apply as direct contacts? Then they have to look at, were they masked, were they unmasked? They have to look at, were they vaccinated, are they unvaccinated? And then once they have that all down, and they have to determine who needs the quarantine or who doesn't need to quarantine, they have to determine that. They have to determine mask to stay dates. Mask to stay means, hey, I can come to school if I meet this criteria, but I have to wear a mask. I've got to communicate all those dates and requirements to all the people. Teachers need to know, you know, Sharon's going to be in this class and she's got a mask. Haley, she's okay. She doesn't need to mask. And do that for every period of day. And teachers have to be aware of that. They have to be aware of who is isolated. They have to know that with the new isolation protocols, if you don't have symptoms, on day 6 you can come back, but you have to wear a mask. As I ramble, you get the gist that this is a lot to manage and oversee. And then that's internal, and then we start communicating with parents. We communicate with parents that have kids that are direct contacts. Then we send out a communication about, hey, your kid was in a class that somebody tested positive. Then we send out a communication that says, hey, somebody in your building tested positive for COVID. And then Jenny and her team have to update with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health a line list saying, here's the positive case, here's all the direct contacts. So it's a full-time job. It doesn't stop there. We have to do that for bus, lunch, extracurricular, athletics. So when you're talking about the first week we came back from winter break, we had 160 positive cases. That's why we put masks on students, because it alleviated pretty much contact tracing in the classroom. What the Board of Health has said is, hey, we get it because of Omicron that contact tracing has become unwieldy. And we're not seeing really negative effects in schools of kids identified as direct contacts either being a spreader or testing positive. So let's take a look. What does this mean for Strongsville City Schools? It may be hard for people to see in the audience, but I'll send this out to all of the parents in an update tomorrow. This is this chart shows all of our data from the very first day of school until this past Sunday. So you can see we've broken it down by every school in the top. And the blue column says how many kids have been quarantined. Let me correct. Students and adults, they're all inclusive in this. Students and adults, how many have been quarantined? Now this is not individual people, right? Kids have been quarantined 2-3 times. So there's redundancy in the data. And then what is the percentage of enrollment? So for example, Kinsner Elementary School has had 212 people at Kinsner be quarantined this year. That's 34% of people at Kinsner. The orange columns at the bottom are just totals broken down by pre-K to 5, grades 6 to 12, and everybody. The green column is cumulative cases of COVID. So again, you can look and say, I'll use Kinsner as an example. 109 staff students have tested positive for COVID. That's 17.5%, 17.6% of the folks at Kinsner. We calculate the spread of COVID internally. And what that means is if you are identified as a direct contact and later test positive, it doesn't matter whether we think you had contact outside of school, we consider that spread. So that says, skipping down to Whitney, all year of the 72 cases at Whitney, 5 of those 72 have been internal spread. I was a direct contact, I was quarantined because of school, and I later tested positive. The red column, which I labeled as cumulative cases that were suspected to come from home, that's just taking the green column minus the blue column. So going to Whitney's example, 72 total cases, 5 were spread at school. That means of all the cases, 67 were suspected that were spread, contracted at home. That's 93% of the cases. You go to the bottom, basically, as a school district, 93% of all of our COVID cases are contact traced outside of school. I share this even though the Department of Health has said we don't need to contact trace anymore. I want to reassure everybody that we wouldn't do something unless we thought it was safe for our students and staff. We are seeing very few cases of COVID that are transmitted in our school district. So it is time to begin to look at a long-term solution. And one of the things we have to think about is, what is the reality of contact tracing? Does it help build in securities that we're going to prevent spread, prevent clusters or outbreaks of COVID in the district? What we have to realize is that Haley's going to be my example tonight. Haley tests positive for COVID. She calls us. She may have tested positive. She may have had symptoms 2 days ago. She takes a test. The test takes 2 days to get the results back. We get the results back. She's already in school by the time we are doing contact tracing. So based on testing results, home tests, the reliability is not 100%, and asymptomatic cases that go undetected. Contact tracing is not a foolproof science, and we're contact tracing a lot of times after, they say a couple days before symptoms, a couple days after symptoms is the highest rate of spread. We're finding out about that probably after that's already happened. The other piece of it, I'm a parent, I have multiple kids. Maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but every time I get that COVID email, I delete it because I get it every day. We're bombarding families with emails and notifications to a point where for some, it may just be background noise now. It's not communication folks are paying attention to. As we talked about, through our contact tracing, a majority of students are contracting it outside of school. The other thing that's important to note is when we count cases as spread, as I said, it's you were a direct contact at school, but the reality is the majority of the cases that are considered spread for our school district, there's also other pathways. There's boyfriends and girlfriends in that number. There's play on the same sports team. There's we were at the same birthday party together. So we're not casting blame at all, but it's just to say, even of that 7%, there are possibilities that it's even lower than that 7%. And most importantly is that we need to put 100% of our efforts on the social emotional needs and the academic needs of our students. And we're at a point where it's safe to move away from all of the rules and restrictions and contact tracing related restrictions and rules that we have based on the example that I gave of what teachers need to be aware of, what they need to monitor, what administrators need to monitor as well. So I've broken this down into two phases that I would like the board to consider. The first phase goes from Monday until Friday, February 25th. That gives us 2 board meetings in there, so we've got time to ebb and flow. The February 24th, I would bring this back up as we're ready to go to phase 2 to see where we're at and to make sure we're all good to move to phase 2. But phase 1 says, and this will always be the case, we need to continue to have all COVID positive cases reported to the schools. This is ODH, this is Cuyahoga County Board of Health, this is us saying staff, students follow the same procedures to report COVID positive cases to school. We still need that to happen. This is the order, and I agree with the order. It says we can discontinue all contact tracing unless there's a cluster or outbreak. So the cluster or outbreak, though, will be determined by the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. If you see the order or the letter, it says LDH. LDH means local Department of Health. So we are out of the contact tracing business. We contact trace when Cuyahoga County Board of Health says, hey, we're seeing a lot of cases, and they've reached out to us before to say, hey, we're seeing a lot of cases come from this sports team. We're seeing a lot of cases come from this building or this pocket of students. So they will reach out to us. They'll still get the line list of who is COVID positive, and they'll do the contact tracing, or they'll direct us to do the contact tracing, and we'll use the same procedures. We will continue. The order says, hey, schools should continue to use the reduced isolation protocols. So we'll continue to do that, and the mask to stay and test to play if we know. Mask to stay and test to play is if you are a direct contact. So if we know of a student, we're not contact tracing, but if we know, we'll recommend that. But all of those protocols are if you have no symptoms, right? If you have symptoms, stay home, and that's the case before COVID. It's the case now. If you have symptoms, if you're not feeling well, just please stay home. We will continue to use our dashboard. So I don't want our families to feel like we're stopping all communication on COVID. Our dashboard in phase 1 will continue to be updated Monday to Friday. But because we're not doing contact tracing now, we're going to eliminate the reporting of quarantines. We will report the active isolations because that will be reported to us, and not the quarantine. So that's a column that we would eliminate, but the process of Monday through Friday by 5 p.m., Jenny will continue to do that. In terms of the notifications, and this would be notifications of, hey, there's a student that's COVID positive. I feel that at the secondary level, because of the number of students switching classes, changing classes, the building notifications, I think of it, and a lot of you are parents here or have experience with schools or kids. I don't know if, hey, there was a COVID case in a building that has 400 people in it is really providing much viable information. So I think we can eliminate that for everybody. Individual COVID notifications, that means a direct contact. Hey, Sharon sitting close to Haley, you're a direct contact. We're not contact tracing anymore, so we're not doing that, so we don't have that to report. Well, we do have to report, and we don't want to do this at the secondary level just because kids are traveling through 8 classes a day and it becomes a large task. But we still want to, in this phase 1, let parents know, hey, a child in your class tested positive, like we have done there. So we want to continue. You've got the dashboard. You've got the classroom notification. And if there's a parent that's concerned and wants to reach out and call the principal and say, hey, I just want to verify, you can always do that, and we can take a look. But we're looking for global communications, pre-K to 5 only, based on classroom exposure. And then we'll continue to, with the current social distancing in the classrooms. What that means is we've got the desks in rows. We've got them, 3 feet apart. We will be next week. I've told the buildings that they can go back to the pre-winter break lunchroom setup. So at the middle school, they were eating in some of the classrooms. The high school had them in the auxiliary gym. Based on where the numbers are, and the numbers continue to plummet, and the Board of Health is saying, like, we should be in a good spot from now until at least spring. I think they dropped by 40% over the last week. So we're in a good spot to we're still socially distanced, but not as far, but to go back to the lunchroom normal procedure. So that's what I'm recommending for the next month. Mr. Micko, do you want to hear both phases before you comment, or anybody comments, or do you want to pause here?
No, let's hear phase 2.
Okay. So phase 2, I just put in bold the differences. So everything is the same, and I missed one bold, I apologize. So the third bullet from the bottom, we will continue to have a dashboard. We will continue to have it updated for isolations, but I want to move in phase 2 to once a week to Fridays only. The reason we want to do that is the Board of Health now is only requiring us, effective immediately, only requiring us to report COVID positive cases on Fridays. It used to be daily, right? So we're going to say, hey, to get everybody comfortable with this, we'll do that for a month. It's not a heavy lift for us. But after that, we need to kind of have a long-term plan, and a weekly update to the dashboard should be sufficient. As always, if things change, we can update more frequently, but that's the plan. At that time, I want to discontinue all COVID notifications. So the only change there would be saying preschool and elementary school, we're no longer going to communicate if somebody in your class has COVID. So that's really the only change. And then throughout that starting in that time period, I want to start taking a look at reducing COVID restrictions related to school buses, classroom seating, other social distancing requirements that are impeding what's in the best interest of students. I guess I think this is my last slide. Yeah, my closing comments are this. COVID is not disappearing, right? It's something that's just going to be a part of another virus that has its peaks and valleys based on what all the medical professionals are saying. And so we have to move from kind of what I view as, we had a short-term plan in the beginning of 2020. We had kind of a mid-range plan for the last year. Now we have to look at what is our long-range plan for how we are going to operate as a school district, with the fact that COVID is going to be a part of our lives and continue to be there as we move forward. And so this is a phased approach to get us to that long-term plan to where we can keep our staff and students safe and healthy. I've not just thought about our school district, I've thought about the impact of our decisions on our community. I've thought the impact of our decisions on our healthcare systems, and I've asked those questions. I've asked for people to share with me data that says the cases that are originating from school are taxing our community, are taxing our healthcare system, and I'm not casting blame, but I haven't been able to, nobody's provided me with that data yet to say spread in schools is taxing our healthcare system. So I just want people to know, although it's not part of my presentation, those are conversations we've had, things that I've considered. I've asked our liaison with the Board of Health to share. If that's the case, let me know. But that hasn't been shared. There's not that data available that says that school districts are having that negative effect. And when you look at the Department of Health order, it says kids need to be in school and schools need to be open. And schools, I think if you look, are one of the safest places in terms of spread of COVID. So those are the phased-in approach, and now I turn over to Mr. Micko, you and the board, for any comments, feedback, or further direction.
Who wants to go first? Hearing none. I like the plan. It seems reasonable. The comments that I was going to share is I don't think we need to follow these dates. They're good dates to get started, but if the facts on the ground says, you know what, we can accelerate this, we have those midpoint board meetings that we can certainly accelerate into phase 2 if the facts on the ground say, hey, let's do that. Speaking for myself, I agree with what you said, Cameron. We are now in the phase of how are we going to, I don't want to sound trite, but live with the COVID, because it's not going to disappear. It's not going to go away. But with every day, week, month, it's no longer a crisis. It's part of the landscape along with everything else. So I think it's reasonable. And like I said, the feedback would be that if we can move faster, let's do that. One of the things that you and I have talked about quite a bit is all of this stuff can be important, but it has a consequence. And everyone knows that right now, the consequence has been for the education of our students. And so it is time for us to be judicious and say, if we're doing things that aren't providing value, but they're taking away from the education we're providing our students, it's time to stop doing that. So I do think that seems very reasonable, and we'll get there. I know when we came back from Christmas, how many students did you say were positive?
160 students and staff in that first week.
160. I mean, that's an alarming number, and then it has quickly dropped, and the last couple of days it has been what we wanted to see. So that's a good thing. That's it. Anyone else want to piggyback? Go right ahead.
I'd just like to say, I think the other crisis that our kids have that we've just totally ignored for 2 years is just a decline of their mental health. If you look at, and I've been reading a lot, the increase in eating disorders has gone up 120%. We don't have a pandemic of COVID for kids. We have a pandemic of their mental health. And, I thank you for pushing on with this. It's been something that has eaten away at me, and people can disagree, but when it comes to the kids, they have shouldered the burden for 2 years to keep us safe. You even just said the hospitals can't even give us a number. Even if the kids' cases raise here, does it really affect the hospitals? We don't know that. We haven't gotten any data on that for 2 years. Suicides. Attempts in adolescent girls has gone up 51%. Think about it. What do we really have a crisis here? Kids cannot any longer shoulder this burden. They have got to get back to normal. I will die on that hill, but our children deserve it from us as adults for us to push for them to be normal. So I'm all for this. I thank you for, pushing it, but it's, I start to get really rubbed up on this one, so I don't mean to, but as quickly as we can push it ahead, a lot of these numbers might start dropping. And I also work with a psychiatrist at Cleveland Clinic, a pediatric psychiatrist. And the number of calls they have gotten has tripled. So if we want to find out who's really sick, go to a psychiatric pediatric ward, and you'll see. Shame on us. It's time to get back to normal. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sharon, for sharing your thoughts. And, you know, we've seen that too as a school district in terms of the mental health needs, the behavioral, social, emotional needs. It's been challenging. You
Yeah.
know, we're seeing the effects of what you're saying. And, you know, we're working on that aspect too as a school district. You know, Jenny, for a lot of years, has led that work, and that continues to be an area of focus. So thank you for your comments and thoughts.
So I was thinking, if you look at the data, the safest place to be if you're a kid is in school,
Yeah,
which is good advice regardless.
right. So in the agenda, I'm going to move back to number 2, which is the public hearing on the continuity of services plan. So just as a refresher, we were required to have this plan posted on our website. We put it together in the summer. We presented it in August to the board. We have to have periodic reviews. Some of those are just internal reviews, which we've done and shared those with the community. And then this is the time where we have to have a second hearing. So these are in your packet as well. I'm not going to go through these in complete detail. I've highlighted some of them more just as notifications of here's some stuff I've changed and here's some stuff we need to think about. I will go quicker up here. So just as a reminder, even though these things are changing, students and staff still have the choice to wear a mask, right? If you want to wear a mask, it's optional for you. And if you're going to wear a mask, there's some suggestions on how to wear it appropriately and properly. So masking, although not required here, is an option for students and staff. On the school buses, we still do have a CDC guideline or a CDC requirement that on public transportation, school buses include that the masks still need to be worn. So that's the only place in the school district that masks still need to be worn. That's no changes there. Physical distancing, why I highlighted these in yellow is, remember when I said in phase 2, we need to start taking a look at those COVID restrictions. These are just giving you a heads up. Here's the ones that we need to take a look at and think about as we go up to future board meetings. So we need to start thinking about how are we separating kids in classrooms? Do they need to be in rows anymore? Do they need to be 3 feet apart? You know, one of the areas that we went away from is kids in cooperative groups, right? They still work in cooperative groups, a little more socially distant, but desks in groups. That's educationally best. So that's something, you know, as we go through this, we need to take a look at. So think about that. School buses. For the last 2 years, last year and this year, we have a requirement that we'll have no more than 2 students per seat. That puts all of our school buses at a capacity of 44 students. Steve, 72-ish on a typical bus, so we can typically fit 72 students. Now, maybe not 72 high schoolers, middle schoolers, but other students, we can fit more. So we talk about how do we get buses home sooner? We take away this restriction, right? We're able to get more kids on a bus, have fewer routes. Everybody has a bus driver shortage. We're fully staffed now in terms of how many routes we have in drivers, but we don't have that sub pool. People get sick, right? So, or people have different leaves. So this is something that we need to take a look at. I'm framing this more as if we eliminate it this year, it would help with, we wouldn't rearrange the buses. It's a whole big process that we don't want to go. I see Steve's face over there. We don't want to go through that again this year, but it does allow us that, you know, if we have a situation where we need a bus to pick up more kids because we have an absence, we could go above 44, right, to do that. But next school year, we've got to think about, you know, getting rid of this requirement and going back to our typical, you know, ridership on a bus. So that's more of a 2022, 23 issue. Hand washing and respiratory etiquette, no changes there. Continue to wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, sneeze or cough in your elbow, wash your hands. You know, our disinfection plan and the air quality plan remains unchanged. The next slides I've highlighted in blue. Blue means these are areas that we've added to the slides based on the new guidance from the Board of Health. So this goes through and just says, hey, if your child tests positive for COVID, here's what you do if you're a parent, and here's what you do if you're a staff member. I've already talked about the updates to contact tracing, isolations, and quarantines. That's just reiterated in the plan. For the diagnostic screening testing, again, that's a fancy way for saying, please stay home if you're sick, do we have a fever? Do we have any other health aspect that may not be good to come to school with? I'm just getting rid of the description of what those symptoms can be, because those symptoms change all of the time. We have the right to take the temperature of somebody we think is sick, but it's not as prevalent as it was, so I don't think that's necessary in there anymore. And just to remind, efforts for vaccination, our staff was vaccinated as a high rate. We had a booster clinic. We've shared information for children 5 on up to get vaccinated. If they would like to get vaccinated, that's your parental choice. There's no requirements in the district. And just in the new order, I just put what they said is, hey, continue to stay up to date and get vaccinated if that's your choice. Accommodations for students with disabilities, nothing has changed there in terms of our virtual learning plan for students with disabilities that are in the Solo Academy. And then if we go through the continuity of services, nothing has really changed there. We're going to be open for in-person learning. We have a Solo Academy for those students that families choose not to come to school. We've highlighted there some of our social, emotional, mental health services that we provide. What we do for food services, which basically that slide says it doesn't matter where you are, you have an opportunity to get free breakfast and lunch.
Can I ask a question
yeah.
about that? It says receive free breakfast and lunch during summer months. Do we know for sure that's happening again in '22?
Is the summer lunch program for sure for this upcoming summer? Okay. So if you couldn't, for everybody, we're almost positive it will be for the summer months, but that program ends at the end of 22 or at the end of this school year. So it'll be determined not whether we have that, but whether it's free. We did do a study. If it changes, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we did a study a couple years ago about doing a summer lunch program, and it was not something that it was feasible to do for us based on the rules that applied. But as long as it's free by the government, we're able to provide that. Periodic review, those were the dates. We've done that in August and November. We'll have another one in February, and then public input. I've updated it in my weekly communications. We've got the public hearing now. I shared that I would do a survey in December of 2021. I did a short version in November, and I highlighted some of the areas here. So what I asked our parents and staff, hey, what's your level of comfort with putting students' desks back in collaborative groups versus rows? Hey, what's your feeling on students working together in small groups but not sitting in rows? And then we talked about lunch and then safety drills. So when I send this out, there's a link there. I broke the data. This is for everybody that took the survey. And so what I did is I took, if you were very comfortable or comfortable, I combined that to be a positive response. If you were somewhat comfortable, I said that was neutral. And if you were not comfortable, I said that was a negative response at the bottom, just to kind of culminate the data. I've got this broken down by staff versus parent. I have it broken down by elementary versus secondary. And we've sent that out to parents in a prior update. They've seen that. So the question that I have for the board is there any survey information? Are there any questions? Doesn't have to be tonight, but if you have, I'm not planning on doing an additional survey on these topics unless you have questions that you want me to ask. So if there's any top of mind right now that you want to throw out there, or obviously we'll be meeting in a couple weeks. If there's any surveys as we go through phase 1 and start to move to phase 2, then let me know and we can put that out to the parents. That's the continuity of service plan update that I needed to provide. Any feedback?
I was just going to piggyback off of Sharon's comments. I think it might make sense to plan a survey to get a feel for what our parents are experiencing as far as the mental health and things like that. I mean, all of our surveys up till now have been more what is your comfort level with our mitigation strategies? What's your comfort level with how we operate school? But I think it might be useful for us to get a feel for, from a parent's perspective, on how almost 2 years of this pandemic, what have been the effects on your children? I think that would be useful for us to know.
Okay. I'll come to our next meeting with some draft.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
All right, so that concludes that part of it. There's a couple more slides that I need to go through. Another public hearing that we have to have. So this is about, remember last year we had a public hearing and shared our ESSER funds. Those federal funds George, has presented on and shared in the past, and we've talked about at length. What was it, in the fall, we got additional funds, right? So ARP means American Recovery Plan, right?
Yeah.
IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So basically, there's federal funds, ESSER funds, that are specific for students with disabilities that we've also received, in addition to all of the other ESSER funds that we talked about last year. And so what it says is that we have to use these funds to address the impact that COVID-19 has had on kids with disabilities. You can kind of see the description there. And that's how we have to use the funds. They have to be allocated towards supporting students with disabilities related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so as we did, we've kind of shared what the funding is. So we will receive $284,000 in these funds in general. And then there's early childhood special education funds where we'll receive an additional $21,000. And those funds need to be spent by June 30th of next school year. So we haven't spent those funds. We're not going to spend them this year. We are talking about how are we going to spend them next school year. And so as you know, in our current ESSER funds right now, we have a variety of positions that we've put in place that are using those federal funds to support students with disabilities. We are recommending that some of those positions continue on beyond 1 year. So those are listed there that we would, MTSS as multi-tiered systems for support. It takes a look at how are we helping to support our students that need academic intervention and support, and creating a system to do that across elementary schools and middle school and high school. We have somebody focused, we have two positions in this right now. One is focused on elementary, the other's focused on secondary. We need some time to get through. We feel we're going to need those positions to continue. Whether both of them need to continue or one, we will see how far we get in our progress this year, because their main role is to build that system, and then that system could live on and be implemented. We have a special education coach. We have one of those. The recommendation is that position would continue into next school year. And then the other position that we have RTI intervention specialists in all of our buildings, but we're looking at, and they were focused on addressing gaps that students had due to the pandemic. We feel that we're trending in the right direction, that those services may not be as pressing next year, or that support. But we do have one of those positions that's in the preschool. And we're looking to, it's really a half-time position. Half-time has always been there. It's been district funded. The other half was supported through federal dollars. And if you take a look at this position, it provides supports whether it's in our center-based preschool, or we also are required to support students with disabilities in community preschools. So we feel that we are seeing a significant increase in young people that are identified with disabilities at the age of 3 is when it starts, specifically related to the pandemic. So that's a need that is going to continue to be there, and the referrals continue to be significant. So again, this doesn't lock anybody in. As we take a look at the whole ESSER discussion, which I have slated to start in March with the board, these are positions that we are going to be talking about. But part of the requirements is we have a public hearing on this one early because the money's been allocated in the fall, and so we wanted to accomplish that requirement.
Yeah, and just a couple things to add on to that. So the money for these were just pushed out late November. So we've already kind of moved on for this school year. So we've decided to push them to next school year where we can maximize our resources. And these funds were also on my Exhibit C for new funds for this year and part of the appropriation measure. So although we're not going to use them until next year, what ODE would like us to do is appropriate them for this year, not use them, and then we can carry them over into next year and rebudget them again and submit a separate allocation. But as Cameron stated, this doesn't lock us in, but this is our intended use. And one of the requirements is to hold a public hearing for these funds.
If there's not any.
Any questions for Cameron? So while you were doing the entire presentation, I was thinking we need to tee up a conversation, and we discussed it before about summer school. So we want to plan that ahead sooner than later. And then I was also thinking about we should start that conversation about next school year in Solo Academy.
Yeah. Summer school is slated for our February 10th meeting. So Jenny has been working on that, and she and maybe some others will provide some recommendations on summer school. And then, yeah, I'll put a notice to add the Solo Academy in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Breckner, our operations manager, for his report for the month. Steve?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our new board members, and also welcome to the arguably most exciting portion of the agenda tonight. So, I said arguably.
We were arguing about this?
The first item on the list under business services is transportation for non-public students. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that school bus transportation for the listed students be declared impractical. The time and distance required to provide transportation, cost of providing transportation in terms of equipment, maintenance, personnel, administration, and additional service unavoidably disrupts current transportation schedules. Be it further resolved, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, that the Board of Education, in lieu of providing transportation, pays the parents of students attending these schools. This reimbursement will be based on the amount allocated by the state, and that's Exhibit F. The second item is the employee parking lot replacement at Strongsville High School. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts the proposal from Vasco Asphalt Company for the employee parking lot replacement project for Strongsville High School at a cost of $330,739, and this is consortium pricing, and that's in Exhibit G.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Bissell. I put the wrong check mark. Any discussion? Steve, can you explain what consortium pricing is and why it's good for us?
Sure. So consortium pricing is something that was actually created years back by Ohio State. It used to be that every time we would go out for bid, if it was over a certain dollar amount as dictated by local entities, they had to go out for bids. Well, when you're Ohio State and people that are that size, as soon as you want to change light bulbs, you have to go out for pricing. What they were having an issue with, and currently what's in existence today, is by the time we start going out and getting 3 or 4 competitive bids, the materials have changed. So the first bid I get has changed, and I have to go back and have that all redone. Right now, it's just a logistical issue. So what the state did, and what was pioneered years back, is to have all of these companies join what is termed a consortium, and they have to pay to do this. So this consortium goes out and says, if you want to join us, you have to submit what your materials are, what your wages are. Of course, you're going to do prevailing wages if it's going to be a union job. All of that information goes out and gets vetted by these consortiums. We then, free of charge, join these consortiums. It's already been vetted by the state, so we can then do what's called consortium pricing and not go out for bids every time we go over a certain dollar amount, which in this case is also helpful. I contacted my Vasco representative, and he's told me that since we got this quote, and it is not that long ago that we got this quote, considering you only get a certain window to present this to you, it's already, the pricing's changed twice already, and unfortunately that doesn't mean decrease. So we're holding a price that the rest of the world, if they're doing an asphalt project, is already paying more for, because we're able to do this at consortium pricing and lock in at this current time.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? Hearing none. George?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes.
and Ms. Stochek.
Yes.
And the motion carries.
The third item is the elementary buildings parking lot resurfacing. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts the proposal from Vasco Asphalt Company for the parking lot resurfacing project for district elementary buildings at a cost of $52,668. And again, this is consortium pricing, and it's found on Exhibit H.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stovcek. Any discussion? It was so exciting, Steve. Can you tell us about a consortium pricing again?
We'll just rewind the tape. I will tell you that this project is part of an overall project. One of the things I've been able to establish with Dr. Ryba is a 5-year plan. And of course, as we move through, that 5-year plan has to get extended. But we are now in a place where we're resurfacing. And I know that doesn't sound as exciting for you as it does for me, but when you're resurfacing, you're extending the life of your current parking lot. You can see from the previous purchase of what happens when you let a parking lot go and becomes dilapidated. This is part of the program. 3 years ago, we put in all new parking lots at the elementary schools. Now it's time to seal those so we can extend the life of those. And that's a constant cycle that we're in with high school, middle school, elementaries, Board of Education. We're trying to extend the life of this as much as possible to make sure that we're spending all those dollars appropriately.
I do agree that the paving projects are exciting. And, I drive 71, and whenever they redo the pave and you're driving on a freshly paved road, it just feels better. And taking care of our parking lots, it sounds silly, but it's important that we do it. Any other questions or discussion? George? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
The fourth item for your consideration tonight, be it resolved, the Strongsville High School tennis court resurfacing, and I do need to clarify, this is for the parking lot, not the tennis courts that we just put in. This is for the gravel parking lot. So, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts the proposal from Vasco Asphalt Company for the tennis court resurfacing project. Again, it's the parking lot there by the stadium for Strongsville High School at a cost of $61,671. And again, this is consortium pricing, and it's found in Exhibit I. Currently, this is a gravel lot that we did not have as part of the initial project. We did not feel it was good at that time. We wanted to see the settling of all of that before we put any asphalt on that area. Keith and with doing things with the maintenance, we feel like this is a great time to have that whole parking lot resurfaced and turned into an asphalt surface for us right by the stadium, which will help with parking for different events there.
And to clarify, we are also fixing the tennis courts.
Correct. We're also fixing, yeah.
I knew I'd heard that somewhere.
We are fixing the tennis, the existing tennis courts that were before the new ones. I don't want to say old because I think people get upset about that.
The original.
But the original, yeah, thank you. The original tennis courts, we're resurfacing. It's not nearly that amount. It's under $5,000 to resurface those.
So now that I'm confused, I don't know if we're all confused. Now that I'm confused,
Okay.
this one it will resurface the existing lot that is gravel.
Correct.
That's next to Pat Catan Stadium.
Correct.
And it will redo the tennis courts, the original tennis courts, not the new ones, the original ones, and that'll increase our overall tennis court capacity in the district.
This purchase is just for the parking lot. The other purchase has already been slated because it was under the threshold to come before you. But that will be done as soon as it thaws. So that is on the agenda. We wanted to, we did have the opportunity before the winter, but I decided when you do resurfacing and you do it right before winter, especially in Ohio, you just shorten the life of that resurfacing. We would rather wait until spring for that resurfacing. And again, that's already been purchased. The purchase order's in place. We're just waiting for the weather in Ohio to cooperate so that we can, again, extend that work for as long as possible. Does that clear up?
Do we need to redo the title on the agenda? Because the agenda says the Strongsville High School tennis court resurfacing.
Should say tennis court parking lot.
Yeah, because, when I read that, I assumed it was the original tennis courts.
Yeah, we should make that modification for the minutes.
Okay.
And Steve, forgive me if you already said it, but the timeline for these projects?
This summer.
This summer.
Yeah, this summer.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thinking about the cross-country invitational and making sure we're not.
No, it shouldn't affect that.
Thank you.
And again, I mean, I think this one will be even more impactful. I mean, when people come to the football game, et cetera, having a place to park close by is great, but having a paved parking lot will be like paradise. They should turn that into a song. Any other discussion?
I think it is a song.
Hearing none, please take the roll.
I missed, who made the motion in the second? Motion.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Stovcek.
All right. Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
The next item, the fifth item in business services, Strongsville High School Packatan Stadium Lighting Project. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts the proposal from Musco Sports Lighting LLC for the stadium lighting project for Packatan Stadium at a cost of $235,000 and against consortium pricing, and that's found Exhibit J.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Cobain. Any discussion? What are we buying, Steve?
We are buying a brand-new lighting system for Packatan Stadium that is LED-based rather than the current halide metal, which is, quite frankly, becoming very cumbersome to maintain, cumbersome to replace, and just all in all cumbersome. The wiring is going to need to be replaced at some point in time. It's an older system. At the board's request, I did put in a comparison pricing and when we should be expecting the project to pay for itself. And out of the 10 years that this system that I'm proposing is under warranty, by the 7th year, and that's conservative, by the 7th year, we would have already paid for it, compared to where if we keep our current lighting structure, and couldn't be more appropriate that during one of the home games, there was a capacitor that went up. Nobody was in danger, but it just proved the point that we need to look at addressing this lighting system and updating it to the current technology, or else we're just going to keep putting great money after an old system. So I think it's time that we replace that. And by the way, the diodes that are in the lights that are 30 feet up, they are estimated to go, and I'm going to be conservative again, 15 years before they ever need to be replaced. And that's very, very conservative from industry standard. So it will pay for itself, and it will also save us on electrical costs. So it's, I feel, a great investment to put forth to you for consideration.
Any questions, any other? So I do support it, and it was important to me that we did the ROI investment. You know, ultimately what it proved to me is that if we just continue doing what we're doing, it's going to cost more than it will cost to replace them. And the one part that your ROI didn't include was, you know, just subjectively, the LED lighting is going to be nicer at the stadium. So I'm glad to hear that we're able to get this done. Keith, are you here to argue against
That-
you and?
A whole row of burnt capacitors will come bundled.
So, I will compliment Keith and his team for these kinds of projects, and I'm sure everybody loves renting a cherry picker and fixing those lights when the time comes, but to not have to do that is a wise decision. There's no other questions?
I had a quick question. Steve, are there any supply chain concerns?
Not that I've had. I just met, what was that, about a month ago? We met, I'm sorry, you weren't there. I met, he'll be there at the future ones. I met with the representative and also the electrician. No, at this point, no, but if we don't get on their schedule, then the answer is going to be yes, and the price is going to keep increasing across the board. So I think we're getting a good price, a great deal, a great investment, and before anything starts to get bogged down.
Thank you.
Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes,
Mrs. Stochek,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bissell.
Yes.
and the motion carries.
All right, nothing else to purchase in my section here. We got through that. The sixth item is a donation. Samuel Fravel donated a music stand, notebook paper, and notebooks to Sarar Elementary School. And with that, my section is done. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Steve? We're not going to let him escape with Keith in the audience. Can you give us the 60-second summary of the water break at the high school?
Sure. We had a water main break at the high school. It was going right into the creek. At no point did the high school lose water pressure. We were originally told that it was just a hydrant line, but as soon as it was turned off, the high school went dry. So it was more vital than what we had anticipated, and that's what happens when you have a building that's been renovated a half a dozen times. Sometimes loops are closed, new loops are open, and you don't find out until something breaks. I will, as always, and compliment Keith and the whole maintenance crew. We did have, where it was washing out more than we thought, of course, you know, it's underground, a sinkhole opened up, and because of foresight of the board, the expertise of the crew, we were able to get that fixed and not have any disruption to the school day. And I will tell you that what it would have cost us to have that outsourced would have been a very large investment. We were able to do it with a little bit of overtime and an $800 part that Keith, with his foresight, had purchased and had in stock. So it was fixed, and all credit to him and his crew for identifying that, getting the repair done as quickly and efficiently as possible. I think I was more than the 60 seconds. But
Well,
again, I'm just excited about all this.
We won't hold it against you. I do want to make sure to thank you and Keith and everybody, not just the two of you. If we didn't have that kind of expertise in-house, the high school would have been closed, and it would have been a question of when can we get people on site to get it fixed. The board got to see the pictures, which just means I think it's cool to see all the excavating equipment, but our thanks.
Thank you.
Under curriculum, we just have one item for a student-teacher placement, that the student-teacher be placed at Strongsville High School, and this is actually for next school year, and this is a student from Baldwin-Wallace. We don't have any updates for student services for this month, and with that, I'm going to turn over to our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Tocco, for the Human Resource Report.
Thank you. Under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. Under E1, we have a retirement of a certificated staff member. Under E2, resignation for a non-certificated supplemental contract. Under E3, appointments for non-certificated staff and appointments for certificated staff. Continuing under E3, appointments for certificated substitutes and appointments for non-certificated district substitute, appointments for non-certificated substitutes, appointments for certificated supplemental contracts prorated. Continuing under E3, appointments for certificated athletic supplemental contracts. And I do need to pull one recommendation from the floor. That is John Cerrone, girls track and field head coach for SHS. So Mr. Mickle, I will pull that one from the consent calendar and from the floor.
Okay.
Continuing appointments for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Appointment for home instruction tutor. Under E4, changes in status for non-certificated staff. Change in status for certificated athletic supplemental contract. Under E5, stipends for our video truck assistants. Under E6, continuing contracts for non-certificated staff. Under E7, we have a medical leave for an administrator, medical leaves for certificated staff, and medical leaves for non-certificated staff. Under E8, unpaid leaves for certificated staff, unpaid leave for non-certificated athletics. Under E9, volunteers. And we also have volunteer coaches there. And then finally, under 10, I do have a correction to the agenda from November 19th, where we had a termination. This has now been changed to a retirement disability for this employee. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the following non-certificated disability retirement be accepted. And one more thing, I also have an addendum. Going back to E2, we have the resignation of a non-certificated staff member. And with that, that concludes my report.
We do not have any items under technology, so that concludes the superintendent's report.
Next on our agenda, report on Polaris Career Center. Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Polaris had its first meeting of the year, organizational meeting like ours was January 10th. A couple of things to share from that. First of all, we're welcoming a new member, Rocky Neal, to our 7-member group there. And we have appointed Dr. Neil Postal from Berea as the new president of Polaris Board of Education, and I have the honor of serving as vice president. So I'm very excited to be serving both Strongsville and Polaris in that capacity. The 22-23 calendar should be available on the website. We did approve that. So if you have students at Polaris and are interested in their schedule, it differs just mildly from our own. Some very exciting news of our current eligible students in terms of going to Polaris full-time to their programs on campus. We had 135 applicants this year, and that's 28% of our eligible students. That's the highest number that we've had in a very long time. So this is good news for our Strongsville students. It's good news for Polaris. So we're looking forward to keeping up the interest and the services that we're providing. And then one more thing is that we do not meet in February as a whole board. In lieu of that meeting, Bob Timmons and Mike Robinson have asked that individual members have meetings. So the goal of that is so I can share Strongsville specific needs with them and they can share their needs with Strongsville. So my meeting should happen next week with the two of them. So if anyone has, parents, administrators have questions or concerns, I'm happy to take those. Fellow board members, I am happy to take those with me to that meeting. And then our next full meeting will be Tuesday, March 8th at 6:30 at Polaris Career Center. And then finally, a quick shout out to 4 more students. We've had a ton of students highlighted as student ambassadors. 4 new ones since our last meeting. Caleb Smith in precision machining. Connor White in the construction trades. Jeff Houston in computer networking, and Alexandria Beck in criminal justice. So we thank them for their leadership at Polaris Career Center. And that concludes my report.
Congratulations on Vice President. That's awesome. Report on legislation. The one update I wanted to give to the public, House Bill 256. What is the border revision?
126.
126. Nothing, the House did not take up any discussion of that. The next time the House will meet is in February, I believe February 7th. And so it's still on our radar, and we're hoping that the House works with the Senate to come up with a plan for that bill that respects school districts along with developers. But please continue to let Representative Patton know that this has a negative effect for our school district, so we need his help. And that concludes legislation. Next is board liaison reports. Laura, do you want to start with City Council?
Sure. City Council had their latest meeting on January 27th. It's nice to hear grant money and donations are starting to come in for the development of our town center. $10,000 from Spinoza Group and $114,000 from NOPEC, just to name a few. This will be an exciting project to watch unfold in the center of our town. Can't wait for that to get started. I hear there's going to be a splash pad. Tom Clark was appointed as the Ward 3 councilman, filling the position left by Kelly Kosick when she was elected councilwoman at large. Tom is actually here tonight in the audience as the liaison. He will go back and report to City Council what we've discussed here. So congratulations, Tom. Thank you. And then lastly, a shout out to our service department for the countless hours spent dealing with the snow the past week and a half. Many employees worked 16 hours, slept for a few hours, and then went back and worked another 16 hours. I just wanted to tell them that they are appreciated. And that concludes my report.
Strongsville Education Foundation.
Yes, the Strongsville Education Foundation met on January 13th, and there are a number of updates that are pretty exciting. They have been very flexible and generous with us this year in that, you know, we haven't been able to do field trips because of COVID, and so they decided this year, since they had that money allotted anyway, that they are going to donate $2,000 per elementary building to bring field trips to us. So they'll be able to do in-house programming for the students, and so those are in process now. The Sergeant Clean fundraiser that you guys have seen, if you've driven down Pearl Road, there's the giant sign, you know, text your $5. They've had over 700 people already participate in that, and the goal is 1,000. So they're well on their way to meeting their goal, and if you do the math, that's a nice chunk of change that they're going to be able to serve our students and our community with. So we are thankful for that partnership between Sergeant Clean and the Strongsville Education Foundation. The grants have almost all been addressed and approved. They're in the stage of Dr. Iba reviewing them for final approval. Super Bowl squares, if you've seen on Facebook at all, you can check out the Facebook page for Strongsville Education Foundation or their website. They're $100 per square for the Super Bowl, but the payouts are quite nice. So if you're interested in purchasing a square, they do usually sell out. So get on that quickly. And then finally, they are hoping to do Jockeys and Juleps this year. You can put that on your calendar. It should be pretty exciting after not being able to do it for a couple of years. The Kentucky Derby this year is Saturday, May 7th. That concludes my report.
Thank you. PTA Council, Sharon?
Just a couple of things. Founder's Day has been scheduled for March 3rd at the middle school at 7 p.m. Whitney School has been doing a shoe drive in order to raise funds for playground equipment. If you look on their Facebook page, you'll be able, this runs until February 11th, and there's various places that you can drop off your shoes. I think it's 10 pairs of shoes in a bag to drop off. So if you have any extra shoes, they could really use it, and that is it. Thank you.
Do we have a student achievement report?
This year, we are going to take student achievement to a direction of celebrating the teachers in our community, in our district. I'm partnering with the principals at the different schools, Sharon and myself, and we're going to have them choose somebody within their school who is doing something to promote student achievement, whether it's an educator who has a unique way of educating or teaching that gets the kids excited, or a student who does something inside or outside of the classroom that is worth noting. At that point, we are going to report on that back here at the school board meeting. We're going to acknowledge them. We're going to put it on social media, and Sharon and myself are going to go into the classrooms and surprise them. So the principals have been instructed not to let the people know who's going to win. We're going to walk in and surprise them with a certificate of achievement to thank them for their dedication and their love for their students. And hopefully they're as excited as we are about it.
And I just wanted to compliment you because it's a great idea, and I think we'll enjoy the excitement and enjoy learning something new from each month as we go along.
I give Haley the credit for that one.
Board committee reports. Finance Committee?
There's no report this time. I'm sure to get with Laura and Ms. Cobain, and we'll come up with a schedule and meeting topics.
Policy Committee?
We have a meeting this coming Monday, so we'll be able to report back to you at the following meeting, 6:30 here at the admin building.
Facilities Committee, our next meeting is February 17th at 6:30 in this building. And do we have a report for Business Advisory Council?
Our next meeting is going to be February 11th at 7:30 a.m. at the administrative offices.
And just as a reminder for the public, those board committee meetings are all public meetings, and the public's welcome to attend. Next on our agenda is our consent calendar. Motion by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent calendar means that all items appearing in the agenda with asterisks are adopted by one single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Stovcek. Do I have any otherwises to remove? Hearing none. For the consent calendar, minutes were a separate vote, so we don't need to worry about minutes. We changed the wording on the tennis court. Where did that go?
I think that
That was a separate vote too, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that was a separate vote. We don't have to do that. Then the only adjustment to the consent calendar is we remove John Cerrone from appointments. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Superintendent, timely information.
Just a reminder, I put this in my parent update on Monday, but next week starts parent-teacher conferences. So we've got elementary on Tuesday the 1st, high school on the 2nd, and then the following week we've got preschool through grade 8 on the 9th, and middle school and high school on the 10th. So check out your principals building newsletters on how to schedule those conferences, and there will be options. Some days they've slated as virtual, some as in person, but we've given parents options of phone, in person, virtual, whatever works. So we encourage you to engage with us and engage with your children's teachers to keep in the loop so we can work together to support our kids. So that's it for the timely information.
Board of Education Other. First, we have a OSBA workshop. Be it resolved that the Strongsville City Schools Board of Education grants approval for Michelle Bissell to attend the OSBA Workshop Board 201, a deeper dive, taking place on March 5th. The cost to register is $195. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stovcek. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Abstain.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is the same workshop for Laura to attend on March 5th. Cost is $195. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Bissell, second by Mrs. Stovcek. Any discussion? I just want to compliment both of our board members for continuing their board education. Hearing no other discussion, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Abstain?
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Any other Board of Education others?
I just wanted to let everybody know that the Strongsville Athletic Boosters will be having their Night at the Races on February 19th at Mashad's. Doors open at 6. You can get your tickets on their website, and they are also selling horses.
Real live ones?
Yes.
You'll have to go to the event to find out. Meeting notification?
Mr. Miko, can I add one too?
Absolutely.
I also add this Saturday at 6 o'clock, the Strongsville Mustang Wrestling Club is having their annual fundraiser, the Wing Ding, and Slim and Chubby's 6 o'clock, doors open. And the Mustang Wrestling Club supports the youth, the middle school, and the high school.
Will there be horses?
No horses.
Bring a trailer, yes.
A regular Board of Education meeting work session will be held Thursday, February 10th in the meeting room of the Administration Building. A regular Board of Education meeting will be held Thursday, February 24th in the meeting room. And we have a special board. Do we have to announce that?
Yeah, the posting went out this week. We have a special board meeting Thursday, February
3rd.
At 6:30
6:30 at
6:30 in
Polaris Career Center.
for the purpose of board retreat, strategic goals, and board planning. And there will also be an executive session as well, which is listed on the posting.
Thank you. Executive session, we do have reason for executive session on the topics of?
To consider the discipline, dismissal, or employment of a public employee, and to prepare for negotiation sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Stovcek. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. We will enter into executive session at 9:05. We have no expectation of further business. Thank you for your attention, and have a great evening and weekend.